Hi, this is Steve from MakeAppPie.com, and in this lesson we're going to learn about auto layout. For those of you not familiar with auto layout, it's a system that Apple implemented 1 or 2 versions ago. What it does is allows you to make one set of layouts and it will work on any device. This becomes incredibly important with iOS8. It's easier to have this automatic system do it. However, it's not so easy to actually use when you first look at it. So I thought I'd make 2 or 3 videos explaining how to do this. In this first video, we're going to talk about just putting together an auto layout of a couple of buttons and a label. So to start, let's go and make a new project. And we'll make a single view application. And we'll call it my size class demo. And we're going to use Swift or Objective-C. We're not actually going to be coding this, but I'm going to make Swift in case we do some coding a little later. Save the file. You come up, go into the storyboard. All is really simple. And then we're going to start dragging a couple labels and buttons on. So I'm going to put a label, and you'll notice the little blue things as I'm putting stuff on here. And that's giving some sense of alignment. So when we go ahead and start adding our constraints in auto layout, it'll behave itself a little better. And then we'll just add some color to these things. That way we can actually see how these things are stretching as we add the constraints. Now, auto layout works on these things called constraints that we'll be adding in a second. And what a constraint is, it's a relationship between 2 views. So it might be between the super view, which they call here the container, or another one of the buttons or labels or something like that. We're going to use each one of these as we do this. So I'm making some blue buttons, some red buttons. I'm going to have a dark background so you can see things a little better. Okay, so we'll take a label and we're going to go and pin some constraints to here. So here we can see the add new constraints. And the first thing you do is you always hit those little I-beams so that your values will actually stay put. And we're going to do the top, left, right, and the height. We're going to set the height to 36. Hit tab when you're doing this, by the way. And then I'm going to do an 8. Let's do 10. 0. That's even better. And then we'll do 0 on these 2 sides. That's the spacing the nearest neighbor, and notice it says constraint to margins. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually update these frames, and I can do that in the little drop down there for all the new items. And as I zoom back out here, you'll see, boom, there we go. And I've got a thing. Hey, it looks better centered, so let's go ahead and center it. And there we've got ourselves a label. We'll name ourselves Hello Pizza. Nothing new for me. Now let's go do this other button. This is a done button on the bottom. And now we're going to use control drag to go from view to view. So I'm going to control drag. And now I'm going to get a leading space, which is the actual super view, and then control drag to the container, or the margin of the container, which is 16 pixels out, by the way, or 16 points actually, and then do a bottom space. And so now we've got all of these in place, and it's for the exact same place settings for what it is now. I'm now going to go ahead and click on those I-beams, and if I lose it, I can click on my button again. Click on those I-beams, and you'll see that we get a vertical space constraint property. And the first one was okay. We're going to do the second one. I'm going to set that to 0, which goes to the margin. And the one on the left, I'm actually going to go all the way to the edge. So I'm actually going to make that negative 16. Like that. And you can see it all bleeds all the way to the edge. So that's a 16-point margin is the standard margin. And let's now set up pepperoni. And let's set up cheese. Okay. And let's now go ahead and pin some constraints. And I'm going to hit the pin constraint button again. And I'm going to set those constraints. Again, hit the I-beams first. Notice again, spacing to nearest neighbor is where this is going. So my 5 is actually, or my 10 is actually going to go up to the label. It's not going to the super view this time. I'm going to make a height of 64, and so I'm just doing the left and the upper, and I'm going to add these 3 constraints. This time I'm not updating frames. Sometimes when you're doing more complex things, it's best to wait to the very last step, otherwise you'll mess yourself up. You'll notice we do get some layout errors saying, hey, this is the wrong size. I'm now going to pin the constraints for the cheese button, 10 again, going to the label. We'll make that to the margin, so that'll be 0. And that's all I need for this one. So I'm just going to add those two constraints. Nothing happens, okay? Because we didn't actually update them yet. Now I'm going to take the cheese, I'm going to control drag. And you'll see, wait, oh, I forgot. I have a little bit of a problem here. They're not equal. I made a mistake, and that got set to 5 instead of 10. And so I'm going to go ahead and change that. And now let's go ahead, control drag. And we're going to use horizontal spacing. Yeah, even better. Equal lefts, equal heights. I'm going to do all of them together with a shift click. So I set all my constraints in one shot using shift click. Again, with those things, it sets it to what it is currently. So I'm going to have to change a value. And the one I'm going to change is the one between the two buttons. And I'm going to change that to 10. And now I got a lot of error constraints. You can see the orange thing saying, hey, those aren't working. So I'm going to have to update them. So click everything off. And you go to the bottom set of those things that says update frames. And boom, there you go. You've got pepperoni and cheese now all set. Text view disappeared, so we're going to have to go put that back. My usual way of doing this is usually setting it 0, 0 at 0, 0 size. So I usually will, first of all, center it with an item and then update those frames. And that'll get me the lost little guy, although he still doesn't have any size data. So I may actually have to put some size data in now. 200 sounds good. 175 sounds good. And we're going to update those. And there it is. Okay, so now we actually have our file again. And now what we can do is actually we can preview it. And if you go to the assistant editor, we're usually going to be doing things with code. But if you go down from automatic all the way down to preview, you'll find one called the main storyboard preview. You hit that, and you actually see a preview of your device. This one's on an iPhone 5. And then you can go ahead and pick other devices. So let's do an iPhone 6. And that's what it looks like on an iPhone 5 and an iPhone 6. And let's do an iPhone 6 Plus. And let's go ahead and do an iPad. So I can now look at this same thing on different devices, which is one of the things audio layout is about, is how does it set it up differently on different devices. And you can see that the widths, for example, are different. I can go and start playing with that little button next to the title there and check the orientation in both landscape and portrait. And you can see that we do have a problem in landscape. Because it's centered, it's going right on top of a bunch of other stuff that isn't centered. And that's not exactly what we want to do. So we're going to change the text one here. I'm going to move my stuff around a little bit so I get myself a little more organized. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change it so that it is actually oriented differently. And the first thing I do is I select that one and I clear the selected constraints. A lot of times you start changing constraints where you don't know what you're doing, you're going to get a lot of errors and make it impossible to do. I'm going to control drag to cheese and make that the vertical spacing. I'm going to control down to the done button and make that vertical spacing. And then I'm going to control drag to the leading space and control drag to the trailing space. So now I have spacing pinned for all 4 sides. I'm now going to go ahead and start changing those things, and we'll start with the trailing space. And we'll make that 0, so it goes to the margin. You'll notice nothing has changed yet in the preview, and then I can go ahead and do the same thing with the constraint for leading space. Let's do bottom space, and oh, look, it's starting to show up on some of these, but not on all these yet. So bottom space, let's change that one. That'll get a 0, and let's make this 0 too. Okay. It's a little over, so I think I may need to change these a little bit, but you'll notice that it is actually now showing up on the 4-inch phone. So let's make those, let's make them 10. There you go. And actually, it looks pretty darn good now. And if we go through each one of these, we can just look at how these are looking. Um, the preview shows that, yeah, it works pretty well in both orientations. And we can see that it's even working well on the iPad. We can zoom out with the touchpad. And there we go. Yep, looking good portrait and landscape for all of these. So that's how this is working. And what we're going to try to do next is in the next video is on some of those. Let's say we're going to do the iPhone 5 and iPhone 4 if we have any, and the iPhone 6. We're going to have one set of button orientations, and on the second set of orientations it'll be a little different. But we're going to leave the iPad and the iPhone 6 Plus alone, and we'll see what happens. And for that, we're going to use something that most people don't know about. It's a new feature of iOS and Xcode, and that is the size classes. So tune in next time for information about size classes. Thank you.